Thank you all for joining us for the How to Publish Your Thesis or Dissertation workshop. Joining us today are Dr. Tony Ropetti, Interim Chair and Associate Professor of the Hospitality at UNLV, and Dr. Janet Dufek, Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs and Professor at UNLV. They'll be answering your questions on how to publish your thesis or dissertation. And I'm going to hand it over to them just for quick introductions, and then we'll begin taking your questions. Dr. Dufek, will you please start us off?
Sure. We already introduced relative to our roles, and you've just done a nice job. I do want to go back and say that my academic area is, shout out to Hosea, Integrated Health Sciences, Biomechanics, Lower Extremity Function. Hosea, prior to my role here in the Provost's office, I was your Associate Dean in IHS.
And for sake of the recording and those that jumped on, I'm Dr. Tony Ropetti. I am an associate professor in the College of Hospitality. I am no longer interim chair, so I'm just back to a faculty role. I have, prior to this, I come from industry. So I actually had two careers. I had an industry job as a corporate, a chief financial officer, and then my academic career. So I am also in a very applied field. Not a creative field or necessarily a science field. So sometimes the process is a little bit different. And so we'll talk about that. I've also noticed through the introductions, we have a lot of you who are actually just interested in publications in general, not necessarily just your thesis or your dissertation. So we'll probably talk about all of that because it is a slightly different process for each of them, not necessarily process, but things you have to look out for.
Alrighty, I have been starting to get some questions in both direct chat, but also to everyone. So to get started, how do you pick a journal or publishers for the work that you're doing? Should you have these in mind when you are writing your dissertation or your thesis?
Okay, I'll start just because there are different ways to view this. And, from a science perspective, you likely have done a fairly thorough literature review on your particular area, whether it's creative or original research or whatever it is. You might take a look at your reference list and the propensity of, or the commonality of journals that your reference list represents. So that may kind of focus you into some particular areas. One thing when you are searching for a journal, you should certainly go to their website and look at the scope and the aims of the journal and determine whether the journal that you're targeting, whether your work falls into the scope and the aims of the journal. I'll make one more comment and then I will shift over to my colleague. It may be helpful to know what journal you're targeting as you start writing, because more contemporarily now, some journals actually have templates as opposed to just starting with 8.5 by 11 piece of Word document paper in front of you. So they provide templates that you then populate. So that's helpful if you have that and you're starting with that, as opposed to having to make this a double-step process. Dr. Ropetti?
Yeah, so I'm going to split it a little bit because I actually think it's got two answers, and it depends on if you're publishing an article, just a regular research article that you're working on, which a lot of you are, or if you're doing your dissertation. So I think that if you're publishing a normal article, and we're not talking about the dissertation or thesis yet, unless those are done and you're looking at publishing those, but they're already written. So if you're in the stage of writing an article just for publication that's not a dissertation or thesis, I think it's important to know what journal or your top 2 or 3 journals that you're interested in. Because that when you're writing, you know how to, what their specifications are, whether there's a template like Dr. Dufak said, what types of methodology they do or don't like. There are certain journals who, want certain types of methodology. So I think if you're writing a journal specifically, that's really important. In terms of your dissertation or thesis, I think that's less important because you're going to have to rewrite it anyway. You don't submit your dissertation or a thesis to a journal. It has to be rewritten completely anyway. So I don't believe that when you're writing your dissertation or your thesis, it should be kept in mind, what journal do I want to submit this to? Because for many of you, especially the one I heard we have a 3-part, it might be 3 different journals, right? My dissertation, I have published 3 or 4 articles, and they've all gone to different places within our field. And that's because I had different data sets within that. So depending on what data set, it would go somewhere different. So I think depending on what you're publishing or what you're looking at publishing, that answer is different. I also think you have enough to worry about with your dissertation and your thesis, that which article you're going to publish in, which journal you're going to publish in is probably the least important at the end, because again, you are going to have to rewrite that baby 4 different times before you even go to a journal. So you've got time to redo that one. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't think about what journals are in the right field, because the lit review will give you that. But in terms of writing for a journal, I would say no for a dissertation or thesis, but absolutely for a regular research article.
So as always, my colleague brings up excellent points. And going back to the piece about your thesis or dissertation itself, correct me if I'm wrong, but the university, the graduate college does not have a specific format. That falls back typically to the disciplines or the areas. And to drill down even further on that, a good idea is to identify a thesis or dissertation that's in ProQuest right now that was done by a student of your advisor, because your advisor is going to want that format, right? So if you know what that format is that your advisor prefers, that's going to help you out a lot. That's just a little inside help.
Thank you. And so what I hear you saying, Dr. Repetti and Dr. Dufek, is that you don't write your dissertation with one journal in mind, because like Dr. Repetti said, you might end up in multiple journals, right? Or in different ones, different portions of your dissertation or your thesis. But someone asked, as you're writing your thesis or your dissertation, are there things that you should be thinking about if you are interested in publishing? So the way that you are writing, I know we just said don't be thinking about the journals because you have enough just writing your dissertation, but are there things that we can be doing while we're writing to be successful, or to cut down even on the rewriting time?
Well, you're not going to cut it down. I mean, my dissertation was 130 pages long. No journal is going to accept 130 pages. There's a lot of stuff that goes into your dissertation that a journal doesn't care about, but that's important to your study. So for instance, in my field, when we write dissertations, we need to talk about the methodology, the assumptions of the methodology, and make sure they've all been checked and that you have no violations. Well, the journals assume that's been done. So they might take a 1 or 2 line that says assumptions have been checked, there's no violations, and that's it. But you're going to go much more in depth. So the rewrite, you're not getting around rewriting. It just is the world that we live in, of taking a large paper and trying to condense it down. You're also not going to get out of rewriting when you get a reject from a journal. And sorry, it's going to happen, but you're going to get a reject from a journal, and you go to another journal, and it's going to have to be rewritten. Even if it just is not a fit for that journal, you'll have to rewrite. It's different word counts. It could be different styles. Like in our field, normally we do APA, but that is not, we have journals that do a modified Harvard. Some really don't care. So you're going to have to do modifications. And so I just want to mention that you sort of get out of the frame of what can I do to decrease my writing, because it's going to happen. It's hard, but it is, it is what it is. And in terms of the question of, is there anything I can be looking at? I'm a big supporter of the so what. Like, why am I doing this? What's the reason that this research is valid, and what's the reason this research is useful? And then I try to go toward journals that will that answer will help them and their readers. And so while I don't pick a journal, I want to make sure that that's the important part of my research, so that when I go to publish, that's already been done. So I don't have to convince people again, because I just have to rewrite the convincing of why this study is important.
So I just like to make a comment about the question on, or the concept of the 3-article dissertation. I think that that's a beauty that the Graduate College has been forward thinking enough to allow this format for doctoral students, and all of my students embrace it. It allows you, it's the one time that it allows you to not necessarily cut down your writing and rewriting, but being more efficient. I can't remember who said they were doing Tamara, are you the person that was doing? Okay, I think it's doing the 3-article dissertation. And you're looking for a model. The way that would look is that you would put together in your dissertation the actual 3 standalone submissions, and then you would tie it together with bridges and such. But that gives you the opportunity to actually include in your dissertation ready to be submitted articles for publication. And as Dr. Ropetti said, a traditional dissertation typically has enough information. I can't remember, how many papers did you say you generated out of your dissertation? It was something like 4 or 5. So yeah, so you had that huge dissertation that had enough, and the reason the traditional dissertation has so much stuff that's not needed is so that you can go back after the fact and pull out and generate these multiple articles or publications. So although you're writing and rewriting and doing things over again, it's not without purpose. And generally, words that you put on a page will hopefully not go to waste in the big picture. But again, shout out for the 3-article dissertation and trying to be a little bit more efficient in your creative writing time. That mechanism allows that for you.
Great, let's see some more questions coming in. What strategies have you implemented yourself that work really well for publishing, and why? And what strategies have not worked so well?
Do you want to start, Dr. Ropetti? I don't want to.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I don't.
You're talking, go ahead.
Man, what strategies have worked?
Okay, I'll let you think about it. Okay, so this is a different answer for different role. So if you're talking about myself as an academician, generally there are 2 roles that I would play in writing. One would be as a lead author, and that's one answer. And another it is as the senior author. In other words, the advisor. That takes another answer. So as a lead author, one of the things that my advisor told me when I was a doctoral student was one of the most efficient ways to go through and write your manuscript is, and this goes to the more difficult part, which is the presentation of the data, the writing of the results. And that is to create your data presentations, your tables and your figures first, and then write the prose around those that describes what story you're trying to tell. Now, the easiest part of writing your journal article is, you are the expert. First of all, you're very competent in the subject matter, so you can write an introduction. You have the knowledge, of the citations and such, and that then leads to your research questions, which you've already determined, your hypotheses, you know what they are. Certainly methods, you did the work. All you have to do is start, what did I do first, to what did I do last? Write that down, and now you get to the difficult part, which is, what did I find and what does it mean? And that's where perhaps, creating your data visuals first and then telling people what those represent, that can make that a lot easier process. What doesn't work is there are just those days that you cannot write, and trying to spend hours and hours to fill up one page of paper is futile, useless, and very demotivating. So just understand that there are people that will disagree with this. They'll say, force yourself every day to write X number of words. Personally, that doesn't work for me. If I can't write that day, I can't write that day. Other days, it's like, oh man, this is going so well. Oh shoot, I've got to get to this meeting. I wish I could have finished that. So that's lead author. Senior author, I have a very different philosophy. It's my students draft first, and then we work on editing out that draft. But that's only my personal view as an academic advisor.
So I have a couple. I had to write notes down so I didn't forget. The first one was something my advisor had actually said to me that I still use for my lit review, is I outline my articles. So as I'm pulling articles, I sort of build an outline, and I do annotated bibliographies for that article so that I know and that's even if I'm not going to use it. So sometimes I'll do an annotated on an article and I'll put it in my outline in a section called not going to use, but I don't want to reread that article. I don't want to have to pull that. And I've done that. I've searched for articles and I'm like, I know I'd read this and it wasn't good for this reason. So as I'm reading articles, I do these annotated bibliographies, just really short paragraphs that really concentrate on the results section of those articles. If there's some lit review that might lead my process, and then I just put them in an outline form about if I was starting to write my paper, this article supports this part of the lit review or this part of the methodology. And so I build that. And so that really helps from a lit review or support for your methodology. I also, I'm going to go opposite of Dr. Dufak with, so I come from a business background where most of my job was writing what we call MD&As, which are management discussions and analysis. So I spent a majority of my life writing results and discussions. And so that part comes very easy to me. What comes hard to me is the lit review. To have me sit down and write a lit review is sometimes like putting pins in my eyes. It is very hard for me on that part. But once I have my results, I can just type that out and go, because a lot of it's because it's my topic, it's my passion. I wanted to research it for a reason. So that for me, that's a little bit less difficult. So the lit review is where I have to have more of the strategies, and that's why the outline works. The other thing is, while I agree with if you can't write, don't write, I think it's important to schedule time for yourself, so you at least have it on your calendar. And so like a meeting, and then if you sit down and it's just not coming to you, you don't have to write. But what you don't want to do is say, oh, it's my time to meet, but I want to do this instead. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about setting a time and you sit down and you give yourself 15, 20 minutes and nothing's coming to you, but you have it scheduled for that hour. You don't have to force write, but you can have that time there. Also, I think it's important, we all work better different times of the day. And knowing that for you is important. So I know for me, mid-morning to early afternoon is probably the best time for me to do my lit review or my research. I can do my results at really any time, but that's the time that I need. And I think it's important to know. Some people are morning people, some people are night people, some people are evening people, right? And so you just need to know what works for you and schedule that out.
So I've just learned something from Dr. Ropetti. I'm quite an advocate of interdisciplinary research. So I think interdisciplinary writing, where I write the front end of the paper and you write the back end, because you're good at that one. Yeah, okay. I see.
I'm trying to find my co-authors, but they all want to do results.
This one wouldn't, right? No, not really. There's a question in the chat. How old and current have to be your sources or references? So that's sort of a double-edged sword. There are some citations in particular areas that are salient, that are, and they might be 20 years old, they may be older, but they are the go-to citation. And there's nothing wrong with using that. If in fact all of your citations are 20 years old, you're likely not going to have a very favorable review, because reviewers will see this as the fact that the authors are not contemporary in the content area. Now, unlike when I was in your shoes as a master's student, a PhD student or such, we actually had to either subscribe to journals or go to libraries and find things. Google's great right now, right? All you have to do, but the problem, one of the shortcomings is sometimes some of those classic papers are not indexed, online. So if you happen to see a citation in your area that you can't find online, that people are using over and over and over again, and therefore you've never read it, it might do yourself a professional favor to go find that citation. So there are different things here. I sometimes see this as view the older, more classic reference in the middle of more contemporary references as, hey, that's really a scholar. They really know their area. When I'm reviewing, I have that view. So Dr. Ropetti, what about from the business perspective and from your academic area?
Yeah, so again, if it's seminal to the work, no matter how old it is, it needs to be cited, because it also lets the reviewers know you know your area. And so depending on it, like your theory, don't leave out your seminal author of your theory. You just don't. Like, I don't care how old it is. Like, if it's 40 years old, it might be a short reference. It might be a reference that says seminal work was from blah, 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 and then build on that. When it says how current, as current as you can get. And we are, unlike when Dr. Dufak went, when I went to school, we had the library, although even now there's been a change with this early access or early online, they're calling it. And so we don't have to wait that year for it to get published. And so you always want to, what I do before submitting, even after the thing is written, I do a quick search to see if anything has come up, since I last did my lit review. Because a lot, we write our lit reviews first, then we go and do our research, our methodology, or we do the research and we write up the results. That could take 6 months, and it could take even 3 months to a year to do that. If I don't go back and do a lit review, a lit search in that last 6 months to a year, I could be losing something important, especially somebody that may have written something exactly like mine. We're seeing it now with COVID research, right? Is that if you did not do any if you've done research and then you didn't look in the last 6 months of the literature, you may think you've got this brilliant idea that's really already been studied and published 4 times. So I always do a quick review before submission to make sure I haven't missed anything important, especially for the journal I'm submitting to. So I especially look up that journal specifically to see, did they just do something on my topic that I either need to add, or they're going to not want my paper because it's too similar to something that's already been done.
Thank you. Great. Another question that's come in says, what are the different options, or what are the strengths and weakness of the different options for publishing? So articles, books, or book chapters. Is there one that you suggest over others, and why?
That's going to be very area specific. Typically, from my experiences in the sciences and health sciences, original research is the top dog. And sometimes book and book chapters are not weighted even equally, that they're viewed as lesser. Now, this does change as you go through your academic career, where as you become more experienced and you're looked at more, you're considered more to be an expert in an area, you may find you're asked on multiple occasions to contribute book chapters or even write books. So definitely it is area specific. People in English and in some of the journalism areas, the books are the requirement, right? That you're not considered a scholar until your book is published. So, Dr. Repetti, do you have another view on this, or?
No, I agree. I think the best way to find out that answer, you would probably know just from being in the field, but for those of you that are looking at going the academic route, what I would do is look into the schools that you're looking at going to or that you want to work for and find out what's required of them for promotion and tenure. And so, because that will give you an idea where to publish. So like Dr. Dunine, in our field, books and book chapters are not, they even tell you do not even consider doing it when you're in tenure track because it will not count for anything. But then once you become, to get full, that's one of the things they're looking for, is that you're an expert in the area. So, you know, I've got a couple book chapters done now. I've got a book editor coming out that I'm editor on, and chapters coming out. I've got a couple more in the pipelines, but that came after tenure because I get zero credit for those. Like literally my book chapters count in our college as a presentation, not a publication. So, which counts for almost nothing for promotion and tenure. So it's generally because in our field, they're not considered peer reviewed, even though the book that we're writing, the chapters have all been peer reviewed. It's a different process. And so you really need to make sure that you're looked into your field. And let's say that you're not sure where you want to work. Talk to the people at UNLV that are within your college. What do you guys require for promotion and tenure? You know, if I want to go this route, what do you require? You know, do you like books? Do you not like books? And then that's where you're going to have to concentrate on for the first 7 years of your career.
Great. I'm just waiting to see if there's any other questions rolling in. We don't have any at the moment. Any topics regarding or any information you'd like to share, any topics regarding publishing your thesis or dissertation, piece of advice that maybe we haven't touched upon yet, but that can be very fruitful and helpful for our boot campers. Dr. Dufek, you want to come immediately to mind?
Yeah, I do have something that I'd like to bring up, and this is grown with the propensity of the internet and just the seismic growth of the number of journals, the proliferation of journals, and the concept of predatory journals. These are journals that claim to have a peer-reviewed process, and typically it is flawed. They also have what are known as APCs, article publishing charges, and they're typically cost prohibitive. So one thing you should do before you submit to any journal is check on whether or not there are APCs associated with publication. And when I say they're cost prohibitive, we're talking thousands of dollars in some cases. Now, historically, there had been a process where they weren't called article processing charges, they were called page charges. And that was simply the cost of publishing paper journal. Now, the APCs, the article processing charges, are set to are promoted to offset the open access aspects of your work. So it's published very rapidly on the internet, and people have access to it. That can promote the number of times your paper is is cited and therefore increase the impact factor of that journal. One thing we haven't talked about, we've talked about topical areas of journals, but again, for those of you pursuing academics and the tenure track piece, not only is the number of publications something that is viewed for you, but it's also the reputation of the journal or the source that you're publishing in. So in some cases, for example, in the sciences, if you published one paper in Nature or Science over a year, that would be viewed as quite an achievement versus someone who perhaps published 4 papers in a journal with an impact factor of 0.001. So you have to kind of trade that off between quality and quantity. But I don't know, Dr. Ropetti, are APC's processing charges common in the business world? Not, from the academic side in business, or hospitality, I'm sure they are, but from the business side?
Most of our, so in I don't know about business journals, but in the hospitality journals, it's not as common. The few that I have seen them are more on the business journals, and they're on the big ones that get so many, like their acceptance rate is so low. It's almost like they put that in place as a barrier to not have people just blindly submitting that haven't put some real thought into. I've only seen it on 1 or 2, and off the top of my head, I can't think of the journals, but they were good journals. So they weren't bad journals. They had high impact factors, but they were there mainly, I think, because they were getting publications submissions that maybe weren't qualified, and they were just spending a lot of time doing reviews unnecessarily. I do get a lot of blanket emails from people asking me to publish in their journal. And it's a journal that you've never heard of. It's never been cited in any paper you read. So we get a lot more of those. So I don't even know if they have fees, but we get a lot of those that I would say probably stay away from, because, you want to make sure that your stuff is getting read. I'm a huge supporter of, because I come from industry, I want industry reading my stuff. That's more important to me necessarily than other academics reading it, because I'm trying to make an impact on industry. So I tend to pick journals that have a readership of both. But our promotion and tenure process is very much about academic journals. So it's a matter of balancing that. I also, something I do that's in my world, because industry doesn't read, and by industry, I mean the hospitality industry very rarely reads what we would consider tier 1 hospitality journals. They just don't read them. Yet we get credit as an academic for tier 1. They want us in tier 1 journals. But I want to make an impact on hospitality. So it puts me in this catch-22 of where do I publish, right? If I want promotion and tenure, I got to go here, but then industry's not going to read it. So for me, I sort of balance between the 2 types of journals, and I'll do a 1 and a 1 and back and forth. And the stuff that goes in the tier 1 that I know for a fact industry's not going to read, I spend the time that I get, again, 0 credit for. It's like a book chapter. I will do white papers or trade articles. So I will reach out to my contacts at the industry trade journals. They want academic, and I will rewrite an academic article to 1,000 words to go into a magazine or an online publication, so that the information at least gets out there. So I feel like I'm being impactful to industry, but that's something I do on sort of on my own time, because again, we don't get credit for it in our field. But for me, it's what makes it important. And it's why I got into this field, was to help hospitality. And so that's how I bridge that gap between articles that we as academics are required to publish in, yet industry needs the information.
That's great. That's great, Dr. Petty. Thank you. I see Cecilia's asking, so do publications you have written before your thesis, will those count toward tenure track requirements or not, or is it department specific?
That's going to be institutionally specific. the blanket answer would be no. The publications that you have before your thesis are going to get you your job, right? That's really what it's going to get you. Most institutions will will focus more on the work that you've done since landing at that institution. Certainly, that is UNLV's view.
Great. Well, I do want to be able to give our boot campers who will be joining us in our next 3 o'clock session a quick break. I've taken some notes, and I think I have like at least what stood out to me. I'm sure there was dozens more of really insightful pieces of comments from both Dr. Dufek and Dr. Ropetti, but I have like 8 areas or 8 points quickly to summarize. And then if there's something really an outlier that you think is really, really important, if you would please chime in, Dr. Dufek and Dr. Ropetti, as we thank our participants for joining us. So don't write your dissertation with one journal in mind, because again, they might end up in different journals. Number 2, be mindful that some publications do have templates that you have to follow. When transferring your dissertation and rewriting for article publication, make sure you're answering Dr. Ropetti's question. So what? Why is this valid? Why is this helpful? Number 4, publishing articles, books, or book chapters can be area specific. Number 5, look at what's required regarding publications for tenure and promotion if you're interested in a career in academia. Check APCs. So that's the publication fee. That was new for me. I literally had to Google APCs. Next, yes, we want to be current and timely in our literature review, but if it's seminal to your work, it doesn't matter how old, include it in your references. And finally, this was said earlier on, but I think it's really, really important for thesis or dissertation, or for article publications or book publications. There's no one correct way to write. Some force ourselves to write every day, and some are more productive with the rule of if you can't write, don't write. But be sure to schedule time to write and know when you write best. Any other final thoughts? Thank you, everyone. I see the thank yous coming in. Dr. Ropetti and Dr. Dufek, your insight and your time is always greatly appreciated. And we love hearing from you both.
Certainly our pleasure.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very
everyone.
much. Have a great fall, everybody.
Bye. We'll see you boot campers in the 3 o'clock session.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
Good to see you, Dr. Dufek.